Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the damp corridors of history, where danger creaks under your feet, and your life depends on how silently you can breathe. You're not a noble knight. You're not a cloaked hero. You're just a trembling apprentice with a knife in one hand and dread in the other. You're about to become a medieval assassin, but don't worry. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Don't forget to comment with your location and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. It all begins in a shadowy courtyard, where you kneel in the dirt as cold as betrayal, surrounded by men who don't look at you like a fellow human, but like meat to be sculpted into a weapon. You are barely 13, too thin, your ribs visible even in the gloom, and your training has just begun. Not the swordplay yet, not the romanticized duels you thought came with a job. No. Your first task is standing completely still for hours while being swarmed by mosquitoes and berated by a man whose entire personality is grimacing loudly. You get hit every time you flinch. You learn that pain isn't something you avoid, it's something you live with. Your meals are bland when you get them. You sleep on straw that smells like sweat and horse dung. You don't get a bed until you've earned your first scar, and you will. Training isn't about learning cool movesets, about learning obedience, numbness, and how not to scream when your limbs are twisted into positions that feel entirely unnatural. You're not just building a killer's body, you're erasing the human one. Sometimes you're blindfolded and made to cross dangerous terrain once. It's a roof beam. Another time, it's a narrow well, rim slick with slime. You fall. A lot. You get up. If you don't, you're left there. One of the older trainees disappeared last week after a misstep. The instructors didn't speak his name. They just cleaned the blood and assigned his duties to you. The motto seems to be, if you die, try not to inconvenience the rest of us. There's no room for fear. Fear is met with humiliation, forced isolation, and pitch black, sometimes buried up to your neck in mud while insects crawl over your face. The ones who cry, they're gone within the month. You get used to hearing muffled sobs in the dark, and then not hearing them anymore. Your daily training includes contortion exercises, where older assassins bend your limbs back until you can squeeze through windows smaller than your torso. Your joints constantly ache. You're told this is good. It means you're growing into the shape they want. Hunger becomes a partner. Sometimes you go 2 days without real food. Other times, you're forced to fight fellow trainees for scraps. One of the scholars in the monastery nearby wrote that the assassins' strength came not from their weapons, but from their exquisite resistance to bodily desire. Historians still argue whether that was poetic admiration or bitter sarcasm. Either way, it's not helpful when your stomach sounds louder than your footsteps. And then come the knives, not for killing yet, but for balancing. 4 hours. You walk tight ropes while balancing small blades on your palms, learning how to feel weight, gravity, angle. Drop one, and you're beaten. Cut yourself, and you're mocked. Sometimes they dip the blades in mild poison, just to add stakes. No one ever explains the rules. You learn by watching. You learn by bleeding. You learn by not being the worst. The worst is always punished in some creative, horrifying way, like being forced to wear a bell around your neck for a week, so everyone knows you're the idiot of the hour. They teach you to climb like your life depends on it, because eventually it will. No ropes, no gloves, just your bare fingers and stone walls so rough they eat skin. You fall into hay, water, mud, sometimes nothing. And each time you survive, they act like you've only barely done your job. Quitting is not an option. Technically, you're allowed to leave. But leaving usually means you're tracked down and made an example of. Rumors say one deserter had his fingers mailed back to the training camp one by one. You don't ask questions. Asking questions makes you visible. You want to be invisible, not like a shadow that's too dramatic, like a blank wall, like dust, something no one bothers to notice until it's too late. Occasionally, someone visits the compound, a man in rich silks, a woman with eyes that scan everyone like meat on a skewer. They talk to the instructors in hushed tones, then leave. You suspect they're the ones ordering deaths, maybe even yours, one day. But until then, you're expected to be ready. And readiness means breaking your body, your identity, and your morality. You're made to kill animals. First mice, then stray dogs, then prisoners who've been deemed worthless traitors, thieves, heretics. One day, you handed a blade and told the man in the corner used to be an assassin. He betrayed the Brotherhood. Now he's yours. You hesitate. A slap to the face, then a fist to the ribs. You're told, if you can't kill him, you can take his place. You make the cut. You're 30 and have ended a life. You don't cry until later. But you do cry, quietly, when no one's looking. But you never forget how easily your hands followed orders. That's when you realize you're not just surviving training. You're becoming it. You start noticing how the other trainees move, who's weakest, who might snap. You start watching for patterns, because knowing when someone might lose, it could mean knowing when to duck. You even start to smile at your trainers, not out of respect, but because it unnerves them more than silence. You become adaptable, forgettable, efficient. Once you're told to seduce information out of a nobleman's daughter, not with charm, but with curiosity. You ask about her father's routines, then report back. She disappears 3 days later. You wonder if she knew. You wonder what your smile looked like to her. Sometimes you catch yourself wondering who you were before all this. But the memory doesn't come. It's been erased. One of your trainers says, "A perfect assassin doesn't remember, only reacts." The phrase chills you more than the winter wind ever could. You see someone break, a boy older than you. Snaps after being told to drown a child. He runs. The others chase. You hear what happens. His body is dumped in the river. His name scratched off the roster. And then everyone eats dinner like nothing happened. The idea of normal warps. You no longer expect kindness, only instructions. You're promoted after your first clean assignment. No witnesses, no hesitation, no visible wound. They gift you a dagger with a carved handle. You think it's a reward, but later you realize that it's just a mark or something that identifies you as ready, in case someone ever needs to track you down. One old mentor tells you a secret. The best assassins don't enjoy killing. They just do it because no one else will. Then he stares at the fire for a full minute and says nothing else. His hands shake when he sharpens his blade. You wonder if you'll shake too, someday. You start dreaming of strange things, faces you've never seen, corridors that feel familiar, blood in places where none should be. You stop trusting sleep, but you never show it, because here, weakness is a language no one is allowed to speak. You learn early that your value isn't in your mind or your soul, it's in your silence, your footsteps, and your willingness to disappear forever without a name carved on any stone. The irony, of course, is that the very people who trained you to be invisible are also the ones most likely to erase you entirely. Your job, quite literally, is to die either for the mission, during the mission, or after the mission. If it helps clean things up, you start to realize this. The first time you shadow a senior assassin into the city, he's clean, quick, terrifyingly focused. He teaches you how to walk behind someone without them ever turning around, how to time your steps to theirs, so your sound vanishes. But after the kill, he doesn't run. He just sits there in an alley, lights a small candle, and says nothing. When you finally ask what's next, he says, "Nothing for me." And then, out of nowhere, someone else steps from the shadows and slips a knife into his throat. You don't even scream. You're told later that this was part of the test. He knew he wouldn't come back. That was his last mission. Retirements are rare. Exits are rarely negotiated. Most assassins don't get pensions or land grants or even a good death. They just get quietly removed. It becomes clear this life has one real rule. You're only safe when you're useful. The moment you stop being valuable, you're expendable. Even the tools they give you aren't yours. The blades you carry, the poisons you keep, the contacts you gather, those all belong to the network, not to you. If you go rogue, they'll hunt you like a rabid animal, and no one will blink. You remember hearing the story of a woman assassin who tried to start a new life in a distant province. She changed her name, started a bakery, married a smith. 5 years later, she was found dead with her throat slit and a single flower in her mouth, the network's calling card. The lesson isn't subtle. You are never truly free. Your existence is conditional, tied to the whims of people you'll never meet. Men in towers who trade lives like currency. Even your missions are rarely yours. You're handed scrolls with instructions, often vague, sometimes contradictory. Kill the merchant. No, don't kill him, follow him. Wait. Now, kill his wife instead. There are layers upon layers of manipulation. You start to suspect that some of your assignments are really tests, or distractions, or just executions ordered for political convenience. Once, you're told to assassinate a minor official, but when you get to his home, he is already dead, his throat cut in the same style you were taught. Was this a warning, a trap, or proof that you're just one of many puppets on invisible strings? Historians still argue whether these shadow networks had a central ideology, or whether they were just mercenaries with fancy slogans. Some scholars believe they were tied to religious factions, while others think they were state-sponsored tools of chaos. But as someone on the ground, none of that matters to you. What matters is staying alive long enough to see tomorrow. And sometimes, not even that. You're frequently paired with temporary partners, other assassins, sent on joint missions. Trusting them is foolish. One slip-up, one disagreement, and suddenly your ally is pushing you off a ledge to claim all the credit. There's no HR department to report betrayal. There's only revenge. And even that requires permission. You're expected to take losses silently, professionally, without emotion. But the truth is, you start collecting grudges like trophies. You remember every mission where you were left behind, every plan sabotaged from within. You don't forget. You can't. In this world, memory is armor. You learn to look for signs, faint hesitation in someone's step, a twitch in their eye, a knife held a beat too long. It's exhausting living like this. You become so paranoid that you sleep with one eye open. If you sleep at all, the few friends you make, if you can call them that, are people you trust, not to betray you immediately. That's the highest compliment you can give someone in your profession. But even they might turn if the reward's high enough. The higher-ups like it this way. They breed mistrust deliberately. The more you're afraid of each other, the less likely you are to rebel together. So they pit you against one another in small ways, competing for assignments, for praise, for rare privileges like hot food or time outside. It's not camaraderie. It's controlled competition. One time, you return from a mission and find your bunk burned to the ground. No explanation, no apology, just a subtle reminder. You're not safe, ever. You adapt by becoming cold, not unfeeling, but selective about what you allow yourself to feel. Emotions become liabilities. Regret, weakness, guilt, death sentence. You even start practicing your death. That's right, part of your training includes staging your own demise, learning how to fake drowning, or how to take a shallow stab that bleeds a lot, but misses the organs. You're taught how to lie in a ditch for hours, playing dead, slowing your breath until it's nearly impossible. Sometimes that's the only way to escape. Sometimes they make you do it for fun. Once, you lie dead for so long that wild dogs come sniffing around your boots. You don't move. You can't. It's not just the enemy that wants you to ditz. Your employers, your peers, even the people you protect, because you do protect people. Sometimes, that's the twisted part. You're sent to kill corrupt lords or stop playing coups. You save lives, but no one ever knows. There are no parades for assassins. No songs. Just another whispered name in a ledger. Filed away. Forgotten. You envy soldiers sometimes. At least they get banners, tombstones, stories passed down. You get a shallow grave and maybe a nod from someone who knew what you did. And if you fail, if you're captured, there's no rescue mission coming. The code is clear. If you're compromised, you're not a person anymore. You're a threat. You either kill yourself or someone else will. Poison capsules, secret triggers, self-inflicted wounds. Taught all the methods of ending your own life quickly, silently, without drama, because the worst thing you can do is talk. And sometimes you have to wonder what's left of you that's even worth preserving. You haven't used your real name in years. Your face has changed so many times via disguises, scars, intentional injuries that you no longer recognize yourself in reflective water. Once, you tried to write your own name on a stone wall, just to see if it felt real. It didn't. You wiped it clean before anyone could see. You've seen older assassins go mad. They talk to themselves, stab at shadows, flinch at laughter. They forget they're not in the field anymore. One lived in the attic of a tavern, convinced the barmaids were spies. He vanished one night, leaving only a blood-streaked bed and a broken blade. You wonder if that's your future. No one seems to retire with peace, only silence. You begin to understand why some assassins disappear intentionally, not to escape, but to avoid becoming that. You've read letters left behind by former operatives, scratched onto tree bark, or hidden under floorboards. Most are confessions, not of guilt, but of exhaustion. They beg for sleep, for anonymity, for something other than this constant performance. And yet you continue, because you know the truth. You're not a person anymore. You're a tool, a knife in the dark. And until the moment you're turned on yourself, you will keep moving. Because in this world, hesitation is death, and even loyalty is just another reason to be watched. You spend more time running than killing, more time sweating than planning, and more time slipping through alleys than in any glorious battlefield of myth. Being a medieval assassin means becoming one with movement itself. Always on the run, never at rest. You used to think the stories were about vanishing into shadows. But the truth is, shadows don't cover distance. On foot over rooftops, across slippery tiles, and groaning wooden beams that threaten to betray you with a single misplaced creak. You're taught early that running isn't retreat, it's strategy. The best kill is meaningless if you can't get away. Your legs become your best weapon, your lungs, your lifeline. You leap over gutters that reek of sewage. You vault fences into pig pens. You climb stone facades with fingers raw and bleeding. And when you're not sprinting through cityscapes like a hunted animal, you're crawling through tunnels thick with rats and mold, or beneath chapel floors where centuries of dust choke your throat. The worst is the rooftops in winter, when everything's covered in a slick sheet of ice. One misstep, and you'll break your neck or worse. Survive the fall only to be dragged away by guards. Because here's the thing, you're never really safe. After every mission, it's not enough to escape the scene. You have to escape the whole city. You're constantly crossing borders, taking back roads through wolf-infested forests, or hitching rides on merchant carts, packed with garlic and goat cheese. You sleep under trees, in barns, once inside a hollowed-out hay bale that left you coughing straw for 3 days. You've learned that silence is a currency, too much noise, and you're dead. You plan each step like a puzzle. One miscalculation, and you're a smear on the cobblestone or a pincushion for a crossbow bolt. Guards don't ask questions. They see someone running with a blade, they shoot. And they're not alone. Bounty hunters, rival guilds, local militia, and sometimes even farmers with pitchforks will chase you down, thinking you're just a thief. One time, you were hunted across 5 districts because some child saw your hood and yelled witch. The guards didn't stop to check. You've swum through canals full of fish guts, hidden inside monastery bell towers, and once faked a seizure in a public square just to throw off a tale. The trick isn't just to move fast. You mimic the rhythm of pedestrians when walking, and when you run, you make it look like you're chasing something, not fleeing. Sometimes you run so hard your vision blurs. Your breath becomes a roar in your ears, louder than the shouting behind you. But you keep going. Always going. You realize soon that you can never settle. Not really. You find a place to rest on an abandoned shed. A sympathetic innkeeper's attic, but the quiet never lasts. There's always someone who recognizes you. A loose thread on your cloak. A glance that lingers too long. A question you answer too confidently. And then it's back to the road. You move through cities where no one knows your name, and that's a blessing. You become a master of blending in, not just with your face, but with your gait, your habits, your language. In one town, you're a mute gardener. In another, a spice merchant's assistant. You learn enough trades to fake competence. You fake accents, histories, wounds. The movement never stops. You change your clothes more often than you change your mind. The only constant is the ache in your joints and the weight of your pack. And yet, despite the exhaustion, the running becomes comforting. It's predictable, clean, even unlike the moments before a kill, where your heart pounds, not with fear, but anticipation. Out here, you're not making decisions. You're just reacting, moving, surviving. There's something honest about it, but your body pays the price. Your knees start to crack in the mornings. Your ankles feel perpetually swollen. You tape your toes before runs, just to prevent bleeding. And let's not even talk about the boots. They're supposed to be silent, but they shred your feet like cheese every other week. Blisters become familiar friends. Sometimes, when there's no rush, you jog, just to stay loose. You imagine someone watching. You might think you're training, but no, you're simply making sure your body doesn't betray you when it matters most. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins were part of some higher discipline or just desperate fugitives with good legs and bad luck. The truth, at least for you, lies somewhere in between. You've trained your body to move as if chased, even when you're alone. The paranoia never sleeps. The wind behind you might just be wind, or it might be someone faster than you. You've been chased by dogs. Once a pair of mastiffs nearly tore off your arm. You've run from drunks, from guards, from other assassins sent to correct your mistakes. But the worst was, the one time you were chased by a childish street orphan who knew your face and kept shouting your alias through the alleys. You didn't kill him, you just outpaced him. But you still think about it, because the only reason you let him live was because he reminded you of yourself. And that's dangerous. Empathy slows you down. You carry decoys, extra cloaks, a fake ledger, even a wooden leg once, just to disguise your limp from a broken ankle. You switch directions constantly. You backtrack, then forward again. You leave misleading footprints, and sometimes steal shoes just to throw off scent hounds. There's an art to running, a choreography, and you've mastered it. Your breathing matches the pattern of street noise. You duck under laundry lines, hurdle crates, pivot off market stalls without breaking stride. Once you ran across an entire roof line to avoid being spotted, only to land on the back of a butcher's cart. He never even noticed. That's when you realized, if you move with purpose, people assume you're meant to be there. It's when you hesitate that they start asking questions. And that's why you never stop, because standing still invites scrutiny. Even in safe zones, whatever, that means you're alert. You sit near exits, keep one foot unbooted, so you can feel the vibrations of someone approaching. You've memorized the escape routes in over 40 towns, even in your dreams. You're running through endless forests, burning cities, tunnels that tighten around you like a throat. Sometimes you wake up mid-motion, your legs twitching, heart racing. There is no true rest. You've met monks who believe this endless movement is punishment for a cursed soul, condemned to flee until death. Maybe they're right, but cursed or not, you keep running because it's the only thing that's kept you alive this long. And because somewhere, just behind you, there's always the sound of footsteps, not your own, That sleek little hidden blade you love in the stories and games. It's a nightmare in real life. Sure, it looks cool as shiny mechanism that slips out with a whisper and disappears just as quickly, but wearing one is like strapping a mousetrap to your wrist and hoping it doesn't snap on you during dinner. The first time you're given one, it feels like a rite of passage. The master assassin solemnly wraps the leather brace around your forearm, mutters something vaguely ceremonial, and then tells you not to kill yourself putting it on. He doesn't, because the reality is, hidden blades are fragile, moody devices that require constant maintenance and a disturbing level of anatomical risk. The mechanism is designed to deploy silently, springing the blade from under your sleeve with a flick of the wrist, or at least that's the idea. Most of the time, it gets stuck halfway, jamming awkwardly so the blade dangles like a sad piece of cutlery. Or worse, it fires early, slicing open your glove or, if you're unlucky, the tender meat of your palm. You start carrying cloth wraps just to deal with the cut. Your hands are permanently calloused, not from training, but from your own weapon trying to eat you. To make it deploy smoothly, you have to oil it regularly. That means carrying a tiny vial of pig fat mixed with ground lavender not for scent, but to mask the reek of rust and rot. And forget about using the blade on command if you've ever been crawling through dust or swamp water. One time you tried to deploy it after falling into a bog and the blade shot out sideways, lodging in the wooden floor beneath, your feet and nearly snapping off. And these things are not discreet. Contrary to what the myths say, a spring-loaded blade makes a noise not loud, but distinct enough that anyone near you is going to flinch or turn. So you learn to mask it. You time your blade releases with bells, with footsteps, with coughing. You even fake sneezes just to hide the metallic hiss. And let us talk about concealment. You can tee exactly wear short sleeves with a blade strapped to your wrist, so you're stuck in long tunics, even in the heat, sweating like a pig while trying to look inconspicuous. You lay a cloth over leather over the blade housing, and still, sharp-eyed guards will occasionally glance at your oddly stiff forearm and raise an eyebrow. When they do, you smile, or you run, or, worst case, you try to use the blade, praying it doesn't misfire. One assassin you knew tried to modify his, with a dual spring system wanted faster deployment. Instead, it snapped both tendons in his wrist and left him unable to grip anything heavier than a quill for the rest of his short life. Historians still argue whether hidden blades were standard issue across assassin guilds, or whether they were more symbolic than practical. Based on your experience, you'd argue for a dangerous fashion statement. The cleaning process alone is enough to make you reconsider your life choices. Every time you use it, blood seeps into the mechanism, congealing around the joints and springs. You have to dismantle it, piece by piece. Rinse each tiny gear in wine or vinegar, and then carefully reassemble it all, while knowing one mistake will result in a blade snapping shut on your finger. And because the blade sits so close to your hand, you often walk around with the smell of iron permanently clinging to your skin. You can't even shake hands without someone wondering why you reek of blood and oil. At one point, you tried to mask the odor with rose water. It worked until a noble woman asked why a beggar smelled like a florist and called for guards. That chase lasted 3 days. And then there's the issue of blade length. Too long, and you risk it catching on your sleeve or failing to withdraw properly. too short, and you'll have to stab your target multiple times, which defeats the whole point of stealth. You carry spare blades. Of course, some curved, some straight, some serrated, but swapping them mid-mission is like performing surgery in the dark during an earthquake. You once spent 15 minutes in a stable, elbow deep in horse stomp, trying to reset your mechanism after it snagged on your sleeve. You started carrying backup weapons after that: small daggers, poison needles, anything more reliable than a wrist guillotine. And speaking of reliability, let's not forget that the hidden blade isn't exactly a ranged weapon. You have to be close. So close, you can smell your target's breath, see the fear in their eyes, hear their last words. It's intimate, and it's ugly. The blade is designed for a quick, silent kill, preferably to the neck or heart. But real life rarely lines up with the ideal. People move. They struggle. They wear armor. One noble you were sent to kill wore a chainmail shirt under his robes, and your blade bounced off his shoulder with a dull thunk. He screamed. You ran. For 2 weeks after, you had to hide in a vineyard cellar, living off grapes and praying the dogs didn't pick up your scent. You began to see the hidden blade, not as a gift, but as a curse, a constant threat to your own safety, strapped to your body like a ticking bomb. There were times you wondered if it would be better to go old school, just a regular dagger and some boots made for running. But you kept the blade, not because it was efficient, but because it was expected. Clients asked about it. Fellow assassins judged you if you didn't wear it. It was part of the image, the mythos. You were supposed to be the ghost with the wrist fang, the whisperer with the sting. Even if the blade only worked half the time, it made people fear you. And sometimes fear was enough. The blade became your signature, your burden, your brand. You started practicing quick draws in front of mirrors, adjusting your wrist flick to the point of muscle memory. Even when you weren't on missions, your hand twitched in readiness. You woke up in the middle of the night with your fingers flexing involuntarily, muscle spasms from the constant strain. Your wrist developed a permanent red ring where the leather rubbed it raw. Once, in the dead of winter, the blade froze in its casing. You had to sit on your own arm for 20 minutes just to thaw the spring up to make it move. But still, you used it, because what else was there? A sword was too obvious, too heavy. A bow required space and patience. A dagger, while practical, didn't carry the same fear. The hidden blade was stupidly dangerous, wildly unreliable, and utterly iconic. It was the closest thing you had, the identity, so you kept it close, cleaned it often, cursed it quietly, and prayed it would work when you needed it. Because when it did, it was beautiful. Silent flash of silver, a heartbeat stopped, a life ended before the scream even formed. And in those brief moments, it felt worth it. Worth the cuts, the stench, the risk, worth the countless hours spent practicing and bleeding and almost losing your fingers, because in those moments, you were exactly what they said you were. Death in a whisper, a myth made flesh, the flicker of steel that came too fast to see. Traveling as a medieval assassin isn't some thrilling montage of scenic landscapes and daring rides under the stars. It's a long, aching, blistered crawl across a world that seems specifically designed to make you regret ever leaving your moldy bedroll. You don't get sleek horses or well-mapped routes. You get unreliable donkeys, crooked cartwheels, and roads so treacherous they make you question whether the destination is really worth it. Every assignment means movement, often to distant cities, crumbling fortresses, or remote monasteries tucked into hillsides like secret sand. Getting there is an ordeal no romantic ballad ever bothers to mention. You spend days jostling on wagons beside sacks of potatoes, trying not to look suspicious while clutching a hidden dagger under your cloak. When you're not hitching a ride, you're walking 4 miles through muck, rain, and blistering sun. Your boots gradually eat your feet from the inside, and the soles wear thin so fast you start stuffing them with straw just to survive another mile. Inns when you can afford them more, when you're not being chased, are rarely safe and never clean. You're lucky if the straw mattress doesn't have lice, and even luckier if no one recognizes you. You once had to sleep in a chicken coop under an alias so flimsy you forgot it halfway through dinner and had to fake choking to avoid conversation. The next morning, you fled at dawn, feathers stuck to your clothes, and a furious farmer shouting curses behind you. Ships are somehow worse. Sea travel might sound like an assassin's dream, fast, anonymous, constantly moving, but reality serves you a plate of seasickness, cramped sleeping quarters, and rats that chew through your bag straps. You vomit over the side while trying to look inconspicuous. Your belongings smell like wet dog and salt for days. You spend one voyage locked in a barrel of pickled onions to avoid detection by soldiers searching for a hooded spy. You now can't stand the smell of onions. Sometimes the weather turns against you. You get caught in downpours that leave your cloaks soaked for days, and frostbite that nips at your ears before you can even find shelter. When rivers flood, you're forced to detour for miles, scaling muddy banks and fording water with leeches clinging to your legs. You develop a near supernatural hatred for leeches. At one point, you wade waist deep through marshland because your map, hastily scribbled on the back of a prayer sheet, forgot to mention the bridge was destroyed 50 years ago. And speaking of maps, they're often riddled with errors, outdated, or worse, deliberately misleading. You buy one once from a toothless merchant, only to realize it leads directly into a bandit camp. You're lucky to escape with your skin. You lose your coin pouch, your last clean shirt, and somehow both socks. Travel becomes a trial by improvisation. You navigate by moonlight, overheard gossip, or the occasional half-legible milestone carved into a roadside stone. You learn to trust birds. If the crows are circling, there's probably a town or at least a battlefield nearby. Food is equally dismal. You eat what you can carry, what you can forage, or what you can steal. You've chewed bark, gnawed jerky so tough it cracked a molar, and once devoured an entire wheel of rancid cheese just to avoid fainting. You dream of stews, of warm bread, of anything that isn't dry, cold, or alive with insects. Quirky factsome assassins used to carry vinegar-soaked cloths, both to disinfect wounds and to make spoiled food marginally edible. You tried it once, it worked, but now the smell of vinegar makes you gag. You've also developed a sixth sense for poison. Any meal you didn't prepare yourself is suspect. There was the time a barmaid tried to slip you nightshade-laced wine. You smiled, toasted her, and switched cups. She passed out in the hallway before she could scream. You left a coin on her apron out of pity or irony. You're not sure. Even the animals seem to resent you. Horses refuse to carry you. Dogs bark at your scent. Crows follow you like winged omens. Once, A goat bit your finger clean through your glove. You weren't even bothering. It just sensed something off in you. Travel becomes more than movement. It becomes ritual. You develop routines. Check the wind before choosing a trail. Sleep with one boot on. Always keep a second route in mind. You become hyper-aware of every sound in the forest, every light flickering in the distance, every crack of a branch. Historians still debate whether assassins traveled in pairs or groups for safety. In your experience, solitude was safer. Companions slow you down, make noise, and might be spies. You've had allies who disappeared at the first sign of danger, or worse, tried to rob you in your sleep. Trust becomes something you pack deep in the bottom of your satchelander. The flint, the lockpicks, and the bandages. You start recognizing faces in every village, the same type of suspicious stare, the same guarded innkeeper, the same guards who pretend not to watch you until you're walking away. You keep your story simple. You're a courier, a scribe, a wandering monk with a bad memory. You've shaved your head, grown fake beards, spoken in falsetto, anything to fit in. 1 week you read Brother Matthew's on a pilgrimage to a shrine that doesn't exist. The next, you're old man Wren, too deaf and slow to be worth the guard's suspicion. You'd be amazed how many doors open when you pretend not to hear. You collect disguises like bruises. But it's exhausting. Every step takes something out of you. Every new face is another lie to remember. You start seeing the world in terms of exit paths through forests, cracks in stone walls, secret trapdoors beneath abbey floors. You can't look at a building without scanning its weak points. You can't sleep without rigging a noise trap near your door. You once accidentally scared a merchant half to death when he stepped on a thread tied to your boot and a rain of copper bells came crashing down. You didn't even apologize. You were just glad it wasn't a knife. You've learned that civilized roads are the most dangerous. Highways are watched. Bridges are patrolled. Border posts demand names. So you slip into the wild-up goat paths, across riverbeds, through forgotten ruins where moss grows like blankets over abandoned walls. It's slower, harder, but safer, mostly. You once spent 3 nights in a cave with a nest of bats and a skull you tried not to acknowledge. That's just travel. Your companions aren't allies, they're rodents, storm clouds, and the ever-present stink of your own sweat. You don't remember the last time you smelled soap. Once, you washed yourself in a pond, only to be chased out by local farmers who thought you were an evil spirit. You considered correcting them. Then you remembered the blade under your sleeve and decided not to reinforce the stereotype. Sometimes, the journey changes your mission. You were supposed to kill a noble in the next town over. But by the time you arrived, he'd already been assassinated by someone else. No message, no warning, just a corpse and a wasted week. And still, you trudged forward, because even when the mission's dead, the movement doesn't stop. You never stay in one place long enough to learn anyone's name. You've walked through cities burning with plague, villages half buried by mudslides, markets crawling with spies, and you keep going, because travel isn't just the space between jobs. It is the job. It's where you hide, where you reflect, where you prepare to vanish again. And even when your legs feel like fire and your eyes sting with sleep, you walk on. Because the world isn't waiting for you, it's chasing you. And your only answer is to move faster than memory itself. Assassins don't wear armor, not because they're too cool for it, but because armor clinks, slows you down, makes you sweat buckets, and more importantly, gets you caught. You're taught from the start that protection is a luxury you cannot afford. Not when your entire job depends on silence and speed. So you move through the world, draped in fabric layered, yes, but light, flexible, and chosen not for fashion or flair, but for utility. You wear dark earth tones, browns, grays, soot-rubbed blacks, the kind of colors that vanish into alleyways and under eaves. But here's the catch, because you're constantly dodging, rolling, and hiding. Your clothes absorb everything: dirt, sweat, blood, rain, even sewage on bad days. They rip often, and you're usually the one stitching them back together by candlelight, trying not to bleed on the fabric while sewing up a wound in your own side. No one tells you how much of this job is just mending things. Your gear, your story, your body. You become a walking laundry disaster. And the irony is that for someone trained to vanish, you end up reeking like a haunted tannery. You try to keep clean. You really do. But washing your cloak in a river means going without it while it dries hand. Going without it means walking around exposed, which is essentially inviting death. One time, you tried to air out your outfit during a night break and woke up to find a fox gnawing on your blood-stained sleeve. Another time, your entire tunic turned stiff from dried sweat, and you had to peel it off like old bark. And it's not just your clothing that suffers. Your boots, constantly soaked in mud and worse, rot from the inside out. You develop foot rot, blisters, and a fungal infection that makes every step feel like you're walking on fire ants. Some assassins used to stuff dried mint leaves into their boots as a cure, but it never helped much. Your feet still smelled like something died in there, and in a way, something probably did. There's also the issue of hiding things on your person. Since armor's off the table, you rely on tight binding belts, concealed pockets, and painfully uncomfortable harnesses under your tunic to stash tools and weapons. You've carried everything from lockpicks to poisons to wax-sealed letters under your clothes. And more than once, you've sat on something sharp because you forgot where you hid it. One memorable evening, you accidentally triggered a smoke pellet hidden in your boot heel during a dinner with a local baron. The distraction saved your life, but you coughed soot for hours and had to walk 5 miles barefoot because your boots were on fire. And don't even think about carrying a second set of clothes. You're lucky to have one pair that ice and tea crawling with fleas. The occasional fancy outfit is reserved for infiltrations, but you rarely get to keep those. After one masquerade job, you had to dive into a sewer to escape, ruining the entire silk ensemble. You felt bad for the tailor until you remembered he was probably paid more than you were. And that's another thing. You constantly expected to look like someone you not, to become someone else's shadow, yet you're given barely enough to maintain one outfit. Your guildmaster once joked that a real assassin could kill wearing a potato sack. You weren't sure if it was a metaphor or an order. But perhaps the worst part of this fashion nightmare is the smell. You try to bathe, but water is often scarce or dangerous. You can't risk undressing fully in unfamiliar places. And you certainly can't trust public baths without scouting them first. So you start wiping yourself down with rough cloth, using stale wine or bitter herbs to try and disguise the ever-present musk of fear, blood, and sweat. Quirky Faxum assassins reportedly used powdered crushed roses and charcoal in their armpits as deodorant. You tried it once. It just turned your sweat black and made you look diseased. And yet, the irony is that the filthier you are, the safer you often feel. A noblewoman won't look twice at a stinking peasant. A soldier won't waste time frisking someone who smells like old cheese. You learn to use your grime as armor, your stink as a shield. You once got through a city gate checkpoint by playing the part of a mad beggar. The guards let you through out of sheer disgust. But that doesn't make the discomfort any easier. Imagine crouching for hours behind a fish barrel, soaked in your own sweat, with a gash on your thigh, bleeding into your only pair of trousers. You try not to groan. You try not to breathe. And when the moment comes to strike, you have to rise, silent and fast, with fabric sticking to your skin and blood soaking your heel. There's no dignity in it, no glamour, just a miserable reality of combat in soggy pants. Some nights, you dream of armor not, the clunky, nightly kind, but something light, clean, impervious to rain and sharp things. But it doesn't exist. Even if it did, you couldn't afford it. You've learned to patch holes with whatever's around. Leather scraps, burlap, occasionally stolen handkerchiefs. You've used a curtain as a hood, an old belt as a chest strap. It all blends into one mottled mess that hopefully keeps you alive. You see other assassins fall, not because they weren't fast or skilled, but because they tripped on their cloak hem, or their sash got caught in a gate, or their wet tunic slapped loudly against their thigh. Clothing is survival. It's also sabotage. You become obsessed with the quietness of fabric. You test every new piece by rubbing it between your fingers, listening for that telltale swish or scratch. You've rejected entire jobs because the outfit provided was too noisy. Historians still debate whether early assassins wore standardized gear or just adapted whatever locals wore. Based on your own experience, you'd argue for whatever didn't get you killed. Function always beats form. You once wore a burlap sack dyed with squid ink for 3 days straight because it made you blend into the shadows of an alley so perfectly. You've even turned clothing into weapons like sewing needles, hidden in seams, or belts that double as gaps. But again, every ounce of cleverness adds weight, and weight slows you down. So you balance constantly between preparedness and vulnerability, between carrying enough and not being dragged down. You fantasize about robes that clean themselves, boots that never wear out, and cloaks that don't turn into mold gardens the moment it rains. But what you have is threadbare, patched, and always slightly damp. And somehow, it becomes part of you. Your cloak becomes your second skin, your hood, your shield, your worn gloves, the only handshake you trust. You recognize other assassins by their clothes, not their faces. The way the fabric falls, the stitching pattern, the placement of a pouch. One time, you recognized a former partner across a crowded square just by the way his sleeve bunched at the wrist. You locked eyes. Neither of you said a word, and then you both walked away in opposite directions, pretending you were never there. Because in this life, your clothes don't just hide you, they define you. They carry your history, your scars, your failures. They stink of survival, and when the time comes, they'll likely be the only thing you leave behind. You're in a city that smells like rotting fruit and sweat, crouched on a narrow rooftop where tiles shift under your feet like loose teeth. And your mission is to get across to the tower on the other side of the square without being seen, without falling, and preferably without breaking your neck. Welcome to the assassin's nightmare. Medieval architecture, every rooftop chase you've heard about, every cinematic leap from one gable to another, fails to mention the very real danger of collapsing beams, crumbling mortars, or the sudden appearance of a nest of angry birds exactly where you intended to land. You think rooftops are your alleys until one gives way beneath you and dumps you straight into a Baker-S oven, which actually happened to a friend of yours. He got third-degree burns, and the baker chased him for 4 streets with a rolling pin. Cities weren't built with parkour in mind. They were designed to keep water out, rats in, and people just confused enough to stay in their neighborhoods. Every roof you scramble over is a mess of angles, slippery lichen-covered tiles, jutting chimneys belching black smoke, and, occasionally, chickens. Ever tried jumping silently while dodging a startled hen? You will. And when you do, you'll remember this. One wrong step, and the city doesn't catch you, it chews you up. You start learning the city the way a rat does. You memorize angles. You know which tiles creak, which drain pipes are loose, which ledges are too crumbly to trust. And if you're lucky, you find a rhythm, a pulse to the city's breath rooftops. That link, narrow walls that bend just enough, broken fences that serve as stepping stones. But that knowledge comes at a cost. Your knees are constantly bruised, your shins scarred from scraping bricks, and your hands blistered from catching yourself on hot, rough surfaces. You never land as quietly as you want to. Your breathing is too loud. Your boots slap harder than you'd like, and the moment you look down, your stomach betrays you. People forget how high 3 stories is until you're rehanging from a wooden beam that was meant to support laundry, not your full weight, and a bag of tools. And even when you're not being chased, just getting from one point to another feels like a gamble. Wooden walkways rot and collapse. Stone stairs crumble at the edges. You've jumped across alleys so narrow they feel like paper slits from above, but turn into gulfs when you re-airborne. One time, you missed a ledge by an inch and ended up wedged between 2 buildings for half an hour, dangling from a windowsill while an old woman pelted you with turnips. Historians still argue whether assassins had mapped rooftop routes or simply improvised. You'd bet your life it was mostly improvisation, because maps lie and buildings change. One morning, a rooftop shortcut is open. The next, it's blocked by scaffolding, or worse, a beehive. You keep chalk in your pocket to mark safe routes, little lines on chimney bricks or door frames, hoping that by the next time, someone else hasn't used your path to stage a robbery and gotten the whole thing locked down. The streets below aren't any better. They're narrow, twisted like intestines, and full of surprises. You duck down an alley expecting a clean getaway, only to find it ends in a wall twice your height. You try to climb it, but the surface is slick with something that might be grease, might be worse. You slip, you fall, you run again, heart hammering, lungs seizing from the smoke of a nearby tannery. People look up as you pass. A child points, a dog barks, a guard shouts. The chase is on. There's no such thing as stealth once you're moving fast. You rely on chaos. You topple a fruit cart behind you, cut through a curtain-lined walkway, send pigeons into the air. Anything to slow them down. You dive into a dye workshop and come out the other end, blue from the neck down. The guards lose you, but now you're bright as a sapphire and can't blend in for hours. Rooftop running is romanticized because no one tells the part about the aches, The bleeding palms, the nights spent picking splinters out of your thighs because you landed wrong on a thatched roof. You've taken to wrapping your forearms in layers of cloth to absorb impact when you roll, but it doesn't help much. One time, you cracked a rib just vaulting over a stone cross at the edge of a cathedral. The impact made you bite your tongue so hard you couldn't speak clearly for 3 days. Yet, despite the bruises, despite the hazards, you get addicted to it. There's something intoxicating about moving faster than anyone expects you to, about gliding over the city like wind no one can trap. You time your steps with the rhythm of bells, the pause of a patrol, the setting of the sun. You become a part of the city's breath. You learn to read it, where the crows sit on chimneys, where the laundry flaps thickest, where a wagon's roof is soft enough to jump into without breaking an ankle. Quirky fact: some cities had secret walkways between merchant roofs, not for assassins, but for merchants themselves trying to avoid street tolls. You've used these more than once, blessing those stingy old traders with every silent step. Still, the danger remains. Every jump is a risk. Every foothold could be a loose tile waiting to send you tumbling. You once had to leap a 10-foot gap while holding a stolen document in your teeth, because both your hands were bleeding too badly to hold it. You made it barely but left half the skin of your palms on the wall you grabbed to stop your fall. And even when you're not in motion, being on a rooftop doesn't make you invisible. Lookouts spot you. Arrows follow. UVA had to drop flat on cold tiles while bolts thudded into the wood inches from your head. You've thrown rocks to distract archers. You've used crows as cover. You've even pretended to be a drunken acrobat once, teetering on a beam while guards tried to figure out whether to arrest you or just watch you fall. But the city always keeps moving beneath you. The noise, the crowd, the heat. You're just one more shadow above it all. And that's the greatest irony up here. When you're supposed to feel free, you realize how exposed you really are. No walls to hide behind. No crowds to disappear into. Just you, the open sky, and the 1,000 watching windows below. Yet still, you return. Because down there, you can be caught. Up here, at least, you have a chance to fly. Sometimes, it's not the guards, the rooftops, or the daggers that break you. It's the endless waiting. You crouch in shadows, cloaked by fog or night or some broken barrel you've wedged yourself behind. And you wait, because timing is everything. And even the best assassin is useless if they strike too early or too late. This waiting stretches, coils around your spine like a serpent, and soon the ache in your legs outmatches the fear in your chest. You breathe shallowly to keep from making noise, your eyes trained on a door, a window, a path you know someone will eventually walk down. And sometimes they never come. You sit in that cramped position until your feet go numb, your knees throb, your shoulder pressed against cold stone or damp wood. And there's nothing to do but think about what you're doing, who you are, who you've become. But even thought becomes dangerous when there's too much of it. In stillness, your mind unravels a little. You remember faces you tried to forget. You hear the echo of cries you swore never happened. You count your mistakes. One time you waited in an alley for 6 hours for a mark who'd already left town. Another, you were told the signal would be a green cloth in the window. Only the informant got drunk and forgot. So you waited all night for nothing but a rat nibbling at your bootlaces. And waiting comes with more than boredom, it comes with exposure. Someone always sees what you didn't account for. A child, maybe peeking out from under a stairwell, or a dog sniffing too close. You have to make a decision. Move and risk alerting others, or stay still and hope nothing worse happens. One time a stray cat climbed into your lap mid-wait and fell asleep. You didn't dare move until it did. Another time, rain poured for hours while you hid beneath a leaky thatched eave, getting soaked and shivering and trying to keep your knife dry with a corner of your cloak. Waiting also breaks your body in strange ways. You think it's the chase, the fights, the leaps that cause injury, but you learn quickly that long silent waits can twist your spine, lock your knees, and turn your muscles to stone. You develop strange habits, shifting weight every 20 minutes, flexing toes to fight off frostbite, mouthing words silently just to stay awake. You've known assassins who sang lullabies under their breath while they waited, some to calm their nerves, others because the silence became unbearable. Historians still argue whether certain infamous kills took days or minutes, because the record often skips the parts where the assassin did nothing but watch from shadows, starving, barely blinking, drinking condensation from a rusty pipe just to stay conscious. You remember one mission in winter where you had to wait on a church balcony for 2 full days. You survived on crusts of bread and a stolen apple, sharing your perch with ravens who stared at you like they knew your sins. The target came, finally, at dawn on the 3rd day. You nearly missed your chance because your fingers were too cold to hold the blade steady. That kill haunts you not for its blood, but for the quiet before it. And there's the mental toll, the sheer pressure of not knowing when to strike. You play the scenario in your head endlessly. What if he turns left instead of right? What if she's not alone? What if the decoy was you all along? Every second of waiting increases doubt, and doubt is poison. But still you wait, because patience is part of your profession, and patience kills as surely as steel. There's a saying among older assassins: he who moves first dies first. You live by it. You've seen it play out too many times. That younger recruit who got jumpy and threw his knife too early, dead. That veteran who hesitated 1 second too long, also dead. You learn to time your breath with the target's footsteps, to slow your pulse until it nearly stops, to disappear not with movement, but with stillness. But quirky, truthsome assassins pass the time by composing poems in their heads. You tried it once and ended up reciting your old mentor's death words in limerick form, which made you feel both horrible and weirdly calm. Another trick: counting heartbeats. You once got up to 6,000 before your mark showed up, which was roughly an hour and 45 minutes of crouching with a dagger between your teeth because your hands were busy bracing a window frame. And of course, there's the danger of falling asleep. Fatigue is your constant companion. No one tells you how hard it is to stay alert in comfortless stillness when your last meal was yesterday and your eyes sting from smoke or salt or just exhaustion. You've nodded off mid-mission once, startled awake only by the bark of a dog. You still don't know if the target passed you by in those few precious seconds. Maybe you missed something important. Maybe you'll never know. But what's worse is when you're waiting and everything goes wrong. A guard changes shift early. A merchant blocks the exit with his cart. A window you counted on being unlocked is barred. You have to adjust instantly. without drawing attention, still half paralyzed from sitting in the same position for hours. The mental gymnastics are worse than the physical ones. You replay all your contingency plans, try to patch together a new route, hope your timing still holds. You once threw a pebble to distract a guard and ended up hitting a priest, which led to a minor riot. Your guild docked your pay for unnecessary spectacle. But the most unnerving waits are the ones where nothing happens when you've been told someone will appear, and they never do. You begin to question everything. Was it a trap? Did the mark change plans? Was your intel wrong? Or most dangerous of all, were you betrayed? Those hours turn into a kind of slow torture where your mind creates enemies out of silence. You start flinching at shadows, imagining sounds that don't exist. You hear footsteps that never arrive. You smell danger in every breeze. You've abandoned missions before, not because the job failed, but because you couldn't trust your own perception anymore. You climb down, broken not by battle, but by nothing at all. And yet, the waiting is necessary. You don't get to rush. Every successful kill has its own invisible prelude, a symphony of patience and discipline and aching joints. You wait not just for the mark, but for the perfect moment. The silence between two heartbeats, the pause between one breath and the next. That's when you strike. That's when you live. And that's when your body forgets it was ever tired at all. Because in those seconds, you become what they all fear. Not a man, not a woman, but the stillness that comes before the storm. You wake up gagging on smoke and the copper temps of blood, though neither is yours yet. The worst part of being an assassin in the medieval world isn't the killing, it's the aftermath. No one tells you what happens after the blade goes in, after the body slumps, after the final breath sighs into the stone floor. That's when the real chaos begins. You've just eliminated a powerful figure, maybe a corrupt noble, maybe a cruel bishop, maybe someone whose face you didn't even see properly because they wore 3 layers of veils and too much perfume. The kill itself is quick, silent, clean at least in theory. But the escape, that's always dirty, always loud, always bloody in some way, whether it's your own or someone else's. You don't get a parade. You don't vanish in a puff of smoke like the old legends claim. You run, sometimes blindly, through passages you barely remember, past guards who are suddenly alert, over walls you climbed hours ago when no one was watching. And that's when your punishment begins, not from your enemies, but from your own guild. You see, assassination isn't just about taking life. It's about obeying rules, ancient, suffocating, unwritten rules, passed down through whispered oaths and blood-bonded fingers. Step out of line, and you face more than exile. You face their justice, your justice. You were taught to fear it more than death itself. Maybe you took a second coin on the side. Maybe you asked too many questions. Maybe you got sentimental. That's the most dangerous sin of all. You once watched a fellow assassin get dragged before the guild tribunal for sparing a target who reminded her of her brother. They broke her fingers in front of everyone, then gave her one last job to prove herself. She never came back. Historians still argue whether these guild punishments were ritualized or ad hoc. But you know this, they were brutal and they were creative. One guy got locked in a box with only air holes and a scroll of poetry. They said he died after reciting the 3rd stanza 400 times. No one could prove it, but no one wanted to try. And the guild doesn't care how elite you are or how many kills you VA racked up. You slip once, they make an example of you. You once arrived at a safe house to find a colleague's boots nailed to the wall with his feet still in them. You burned the place after that, didn't even take the coins. Punishments vary by region, by guild chapter, by personal vendetta. Some favor slow poison, something that rots your insides over days, just long enough for you to realize what's happening. Others prefer exile, which sounds merciful until you realize it's just death in slow motion. No one takes in a cast-off assassin. You're marked, hunted, erased. Worse yet is when they send your own apprentice after you. That's happened before. You trained someone too well, and now they're using your own tricks to track you down. And here's the real irony. The guild doesn't need proof to act. Rumors are enough. Whispers in the dark. A letter intercepted. A mistake in handwriting. You live under the constant threat of being misunderstood, misquoted, mistaken for someone else. You've seen it happen. A man killed for allegedly leaking secrets, only to learn later it was his twin brother who'd been the traitor. The guild sent a fruit basket to the widow. No one laughed. Quirky side fact. Some assassin guilds used code words embedded in nursery rhymes to issue hits or warnings. You accidentally sang one while drunk once and woke up with a dagger under your pillow. No note, no blood, just a very clear message. The paranoia becomes a second skin. You check your boots for scorpions. You test every cup for bitter almonds. You never sleep in the same bed 2 nights in a row. And when you do sleep, you dream of masked faces and judgment. The worst punishment, though, is the slow one, the one that doesn't leave scars, but empties you from the inside. They stop giving you contracts. They tell others not to trust you. Your name stops appearing in the ledgers. Slowly, your world closes in. No contacts, no backup, no shelter. You're alone, hunted by shadows that used to stand beside you. You once found a coded note left in a dead drop, addressed to except it wasn't T. Your handwriting. Someone had copied your style perfectly and signed a contract in your name. You had to kill 3 people just to clear it. Didn't even get paid. And sometimes the punishment isn't about breaking rules. It's about knowing too much. You overhear the wrong conversation, stumble onto a secret meant for higher ears. Now you're dangerous, and the guild cannot afford danger it doesn't control. One friend of yours disappeared after delivering a message to the wrong master. His cat returned 2 days later with a coin pouch in its mouth and a severed pinky toe wrapped in linen. Even animals aren't spared. You once had a crow that followed you for months, trained to mimic whistles for safe house alerts. One day it didn't show up. You found its feathers in a pattern on your windowsill, a very specific pattern, one used only when someone needed to untrain you. You packed your things and left town that night. Historians still debate whether these guild punishments were strictly enforced across regions or if they varied. Wildly, truth is, they varied by mood, by politics, by whatever power game was being played that week. And you had to play along, always. But the worst part of punishment isn't the pain, it's the betrayal. The realization that the people you fought beside, bled with, trusted with your secrets, now see you as a liability. It guts you. You start to doubt every gesture, every order. You hold your breath every time you walk into a meeting. You drink only what you pour yourself. You sleep with one eye open, knife unsheathed, and boots on. You've watched apprentices rise and mentors fall, and in every case, the common thread wasn't skill, it was loyalty, or at least the illusion of it. The guild rewards obedience, not brilliance, and when they punish, it's not correct, it's to erase. You start to understand why some assassins vanish into the wilderness, living like ghosts. You met one once, say an old man with 6 fingers on one hand, a twitch in his eye, and scars you couldn't count. He said nothing, just handed you a boiled egg and pointed to the hills. You stayed with him 2 days, then left before dawn. You didn't want to end up like him. But now, as you sit sharpening your blade and waiting for the next contract, you wonder if maybe he had the right idea. Maybe disappearing is the only true escape. Or maybe the punishment hasn't come yet. Maybe it's waiting just around the corner, in the shape of a familiar face, a trusted hand, or a message written in your own words that you didn't write. And that more than guards, more than kings, more than any mark you've ever hunted is what truly terrifies you. There's something deeply ironic about the fact that, for all your deadly training and rigid discipline, your greatest enemy as a medieval assassin is paperwork. Not literal parchment and quill though. Sometimes there's that too, but the endless, maddening chain of bureaucracy that binds every move you make. You think you're part of some shadowy, free-roaming force of chaos, slipping between rooftops like a ghost. But the truth is more tedious. Every kill has to be approved, documented in code, paid for, and reported on with excruciating attention to detail. You've sat through more dull, candlelit meetings with masters scribbling in ledgers than you have silent stakeouts. There's a form for everything. Who hired you? Who the target is? Why they deserve to die? How the kill should be carried out? Where the body will be found? What time the deed is to be done? What kind of poison may or may not be used? Whether the local clergy is aware? And if the guild chapter in the next city has been informed? Yes, even killing needs interregional approval. One time, you had a perfect shot window open, target asleep. No guards, and your handler hissed at you to wait because the ink on the authorization had dried. You didn't even know what that meant. Another time, the council delayed your assignment for 3 days because they couldn't agree whether the victim was considered noble class or just rich. Historians still argue whether such guild bureaucracy was centralized across assassin networks or varied wildly based on geography and era. But from your angle, it feels universally stifling. Even the kill tally system is absurdly detailed. You re-ranked not just on the number of successful hits, but how clean they were, whether the message was clear, whether the client sent back a satisfied note, whether any civilian casualties occurred, and oddly how creative you were. Yes, creativity is rated. You once scored extra points for using a shattered mirror and a candle to blind a target before striking. Another time, you lost points for stabbing a duke too predictably. There was even a comment, lacks poetic flair. You didn't know what to say to that. And then there are the code books, hundreds of them, ancient, crumbling texts detailing the accepted hand gestures, infiltration symbols, and kill rituals that must be observed lest you dishonor the creed. That phrase comes up a lot, dishonor the creed. No one can fully explain what the creed is, but breaking it gets you in deep trouble. You once whistled the wrong pattern outside a safe house and nearly got stabbed by a 10-year-old who was practicing to join the guild. and every guild has its own flavor of paperwork madness. In Venice, they made you wear a color-coded sash to indicate whether you were on duty or off duty. In Prague, they issued actual laminated tokens, laminated, to confirm your assignments. In Toulouse, you had to submit a written reflection after every job. You spent more time journaling your emotions than sharpening your blades. Quirky fact: one chapter in Iberia required its assassins to submit their preferred death haiku in advance, in case they died on a mission. You still have yours etched into a scrap of wood. Silent through the storm, blood fades fast into the fog. I was never here. Kinda dramatic, but you were in a mood. And let's not forget the guild audits random checks, where senior assassins root through your logs, interview your contacts, and retrace your last few kills to make sure you didn't take shortcuts. You got flagged once because your route back from a hit in Ghent was unnecessarily scenic. You tried to explain you were dodging patrols, but the auditor just raised one eyebrow and muttered something about frivolous detours. There's nothing quite like being lectured by someone whose robes are stained with 50 years of other people's mistakes. And the worst part, if you mess up the paperwork, you don't just get reprimanded, you get fined. That's right, fined. Miss a form, 10 silver coins, wrong signature, double. Use unapproved ink. That's a whole tribunal hearing. You once got fined for not including the weather conditions on your report. You wrote cloudy, and apparently it was overcast. You didn't even know there was a difference. The guild's response: precision is everything, which is rich coming from people who can agree if the word assassin has one S or two in the old scrolls. And when you finally do everything right form, signed, target down, body position, just so you still don't get peace, you have to file a debrief. Another candlelit hour, recounting every detail to a board handler who is chewing on bread and correcting your verb tenses. You didn't leap through the window, he says. You slipped. Big difference. You want to slip a knife into a smug little grammar-loving chest, but you nod instead. You're a professional, maybe. Sometimes the paperwork gets so convoluted that missions are canceled You once got within 10 feet of a merchant lord when a courier came sprinting through the crowd, gasping, "Don't do it. Contract revoked." Turns out the client had died of gout that morning, so the kill was voided for lack of living witness. You didn't even get travel compensation. The guild rules state no reimbursement for aborted missions unless the cause is officially recognized as divine intervention, whatever that means. Scholars still debate whether this level of bureaucracy was intended to ensure order or to enforce control, but from your perspective, it feels like a trap in ink. And just when you think you understand the process, they change it. Every season brings a new rule, a new clause, a new signature requirement. You once got caught in a rule update, halfway through a mission started under old protocol, finished under new. Result: technical breach, punishable by light finger correction, which turned out to be exactly as painful as it sounds. You had to wear bandages for a week and couldn't pick locks properly. Almost got caught sneaking out of a bathhouse. Don't ask, but here's the thing. Deep down, you know why all the bureaucracy exists. It's control, yes, but it's also history. Each record, each dusty ledger, each scribbled note in a margin needs proof. Proof that you were here, that you did these impossible things, that your life wasn't just shadows and silence. Some nights, when you're alone in a new city with nothing but a knife and a coin pouch, You flip through your old copies of kill reports and smile at the ridiculous notes. Excellent use of drapery. Next time, fewer candles. Bold timing, reconsider. It's absurd. It's maddening, but it's also the only legacy you're allowed. There won't be statues. No stained glass windows with your face. No heroic ballads sung in your name. But there will be scrolls tucked in libraries no one reads anymore, with your code name scribbled in the margins beside the names of the dead. And in this cold, meticulous, exasperating bureaucracy, maybe that's all the immortality you ever really get. You crouch behind a crumbling wall at the edge of a forgotten village, the smell of smoke and cabbage wafting through the night as your target. Laughs drunkenly inside a candlelit hut. But the real problem isn't the markets, the bystanders. You've trained for this. You've stalked lords and bishops, slipped past guards with sharper hearing than a hunting hound, poisoned goblets at feasts without so much as a clink. But nothing has prepared you for the unpredictable chaos of ordinary people. Civilians, peasants, townsfolk, farmers, monks, and meddling children with endless curiosity. They're the real reason it sucks to be a medieval assassin. It's easy to think the biggest danger is getting caught by soldiers. But the truth is, a single milkmaid with a good memory can get you killed. She remembers your boots, your voice, the shape of the tear in your cloak. She mentioned it to her brother, who mentions it to the baker, who talks too much while delivering bread to the constable. And before you know it, your face is being described in a tavern 5 towns over, and they always exaggerate. Suddenly, you're 7 feet tall, wear a scar across your eye, and wield twin blades that glow in moonlight. None of it is true, except for the cloak, which you now regret not burning. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins avoided populated zones entirely or worked among the crowds to disappear. But you know the truth. There's no avoiding people. They're everywhere. They spill out of windows and alleyways. They pray at odd hours, light candles in the middle of the night, and leave buckets of fish guts right where you need to step. You once slipped on a cabbage leaf outside a tavern and nearly impaled yourself on your own blade. The woman who saw it screamed so loud the town bell rang. You had to kill her. You didn't want to, but if you hadn't, she would have described your face in poetic detail to everyone from here to Normandy. That's the thing civilians mean well, but they notice everything. You get accused of witchcraft more often than assassination. One time you scaled a bell tower in daylight, rookie mistake, and an elderly priest called you a sky demon before hurling a broom at your head. You spent the night in a hayloft, smelling like goat. The next day, the village posted a drawing of you nailed to a tree. It looked nothing like you, except for the eyes. Quirky fact, in parts of the Balkans, local legends claimed assassins could hypnotize people with a single stare, which led to a trend of townsfolk wearing blindfolds at night. You ran into a blindfolded butcher once he walked directly into you, then apologized for not seeing the Holy Spirit properly. You nodded and backed away slowly. And then there are the markets. Good Lord, the markets. You're supposed to slip in, grab a disguise, blend into the crowd, but it's impossible. A pickpocket lifts your coin purse. A child grabs your leg and asks if you're his father. A goat starts chewing your sleeve. You once tried to disappear into a wedding procession and ended up as the guest of honor. They dressed you in flowers. You had to fake your own death mid-ceremony and climb out of a wine barrel. You still don't know what happened to the bride. And let's not forget the drunks loud, curious, overly friendly. They love strangers, especially ones in dark cloaks. UV had entire assassination attempts, foiled by someone insisting you come drink ale like a proper man. One guy hugged you so tightly, your hidden blade popped out. "What's that?" he slurred. "Just a cheese slicer," you mumbled. He asked you to slice his cheese. You obliged. He passed out. You disappeared. It would be funny if it weren't terrifying. And then there's religion. Monks walking labyrinthine prayer routes at 3 a.m. Nuns appearing like ghosts in places they shouldn't be. Pilgrims who insist on giving you bread and blessings at the worst possible moments. You've aborted more missions because of a wandering friar than because of any guard patrol. Once, you crept into a crypt to silence a heretical priest, only to find 20 flagellants chanting and beating themselves with reeds. You waited in the shadows for hours, stomach growling, until they finally left at dawn. Your mark had already died heart failure. Apparently, you never got paid. Civilians also complicate things in unexpected ways. They fall in love with you, or think they have. One merchant's daughter became obsessed after seeing your eyes in a candlelit alley. She started leaving notes, then gifts, then eventually your name carved into tree trunks around town. You had to flee before the guild found out. Attachments are forbidden. They muddy the mind. But still you sometimes think about her. She gave you a cloak once, red-stitched at the collar. You wore it for years. Maybe you still do, but distractions like that can be deadly. Civilians love to talk, and they talk to everyone: guards, priests, rival assassins. You once shared bread with a traveler on the road. 2 days later, he described you to a Templar's envoy over soup. He thought it was just a funny story about a man with too many knives. You barely made it out of the next town alive. Historians still debate whether assassins developed specific anti-civilian protocols, but if they didn't, they should have. You develop instincts. You learn to vanish before the questions start. You avoid eye contact. You wear faces that blend. You master the art of the forgettable nod, the neutral posture, the walk that leaves no impression. You once spent 3 weeks practicing how to walk like a mildly annoyed shepherd. It worked. No one remembers an annoyed shepherd. But sometimes, despite everything, someone still sees. You really sees you. Maybe it's a child, wide-eyed and silent, peering through a hole in the barn wall. Maybe it's a widow who's seen too much grief to be afraid. Maybe it's a man who once wore a cloak like yours. You meet their gaze, and in that brief, electric moment, you both understand something you'll never speak aloud. You don't kill them, you just walk away. And maybe, just maybe, they keep your secret. That's the gamble. That's always the gamble. You live not just by steel, but by silence, and you trust the world to forget, but it rarely does. Memories linger like smoke, like footsteps in frost. You become a ghost only if the living allow it. And the living, they're the worst part of your job. You grip the leather-bound hilt of your blade, crouched just below the arched eaves of a crumbling cathedral roof, heart drumming not from fear of death, but from something far worse waiting. Because if there's one thing they never tell you when you join the ancient and shadowy order of medieval assassins, it's this. Most of your time, ISNT, spent leaping from ledges or plunging knives into the necks of corrupt lords, it's spent waiting. waiting for the guard to walk past, waiting for your mark to arrive, waiting for the clouds to block the moonlight so your silhouette disappears again, waiting until your legs ache and your mind wanders, and every second stretches like wax, melting in a forgotten candle. Historians still argue whether the romantic image of the quick-striking killer ever matched the real operational tempo of historical assassins. But in your experience, it's 90% patience, 10% adrenaline, and maybe 1% existential dread. UVA memorized every creak of the floorboards in that merchant's inn because you've been pressed beneath them for 4 nights straight, surviving on stolen bread and warm rainwater. Just to be sure, you strike when the moment is right. You once spent 6 days under a pig cart in Bruges because the noble you were targeting had a habit of switching ends unpredictably. You smelled like manure for weeks and still managed the cleanest kill of your season barehanded in a chapel during confession. Quirky fact: one guild record mentions an assassin who posed as a mute stable boy for 2 years just to get close to a baroness' corrupt steward. When the kill finally came, he did it with a butter knife and vanished before the horse even bucked. That's the myth. Anyway, the truth is, the longer you wait, the more dangerous things become, not from enemies, but from yourself. You start thinking too much. You start wondering about the lives of the people you watch. UVA stared at a tavern for so long. UVA memorized the arguments of every couple who lives above it. You've seen children grow from toddling to running in the alleys you haunt. You've begun assigning names to the dogs that roam the streets below, knowing they'll bark if you move wrong. You become entangled in the quiet rhythm of places you're not supposed to belong in, and it messes with your clarity. You're trained to act without doubt, to move when the line between success and failure is thinner than a breath butt. Prolonged waiting corrodes that edge. You've had moments, hours, even whole nights, where you questioned the contract not because you pitied the target, but because you VAs spent so much time with them, watching them scratch their beard, miscount their coins, kiss their sleeping children, that they feel ... known. And you can't kill someone you know, not cleanly. One time, you delayed a kill by 3 weeks. Because the mark adopted a stray cat that slept on his chest every night. You finally poisoned his wine when the cat wasn't looking. Another time, you hesitated because the woman you were meant to strangle sang lullabies to her sister's baby while sewing torn linens. She turned out to be a poison broker responsible for 15 deaths. You still dream of her voice. Even your handlers, who talk about human lives in terms of parchment and coins, know the dangers of long observation. Strike within 7 nights, they say. Beyond that, clarity wanes. But the problem is, real life doesn't respect timelines. Targets leave town. They fall ill. They get suspicious and change routines. You have to adapt, adjust, wait. And during those long hours, you often reflect not just on the killed, but on yourself. You think about your first assignment and how clumsy your hands felt. You think about the old man who trained you, how he once said, "The body can wait, the mind must not wander." But he never told you what to do when the mind does wander, when it drifts into the past, where faces you barely remember stare back at you from the shadows, when it loops around regrets like a noose tightening at the throat. You start whispering to yourself. You hum songs you haven't heard in years. You count to 1,000 and back. You name the stars in a night sky that never cares who's beneath it. Once, You tried to write a poem in your head to pass the time while staked out in an abandoned bell tower. You ended up weeping, not loudly, but enough that your breath fogged the cold stone like a confession. And all the while, you're surrounded by decapigen droppings, spider webs, the smell of rotting wood, and old piss from drunkards who thought the alley was private. The world doesn't pause while you wait. The world continues, loud and strange and completely indifferent. Sometimes a bird lands beside you, head tilting, curious. Once a rat crawled across your stomach and fell asleep. You didn't move for an hour. Sometimes you wonder if you've become invisible, not just by craft, but by existence. You could die in this spot and no one would notice for weeks. You once found bones beneath a trapdoor stake out some other killer, some other century. No name, just dust and buttons. And yet, for all the boredom and weariness, the waiting sharpens you too. It's in the stillness that you perfect your awareness. You notice the barely audible shift of a lock 2 buildings away. You read lips through a tavern window and learn who's cheating whom. You predict guard rotations to the minute. You begin to feel the heartbeat of the place you've invaded. And when the moment finally comes, when the lantern flickers twice, when the guards laugh too long, when your mark turns to sneezer, already moving, you are wind in a tunnel, shadow through fog, death without announcement. And for those 10 seconds, all the waiting is worth it. Everything slows down, clear as water, clean as snow. You feel nothing but purpose. Then it's over. A heartbeat, maybe 2. Blood cools, a body slumps. You vanish, and the waiting starts all over again. Because after the kill, you can't just walk away. You wait for the right moment to leave. You wait for the area to clear. You wait for your legs to stop shaking. Because they always do. No matter how many you've killed, no matter how calm you think you are, your legs betray the truth. You wait for the adrenaline to burn away. You wait for your face to become neutral again. You wait to be forgotten by the world. You wait for the next name on the list. That's life. Not action, not glory. Waiting. You slip through a craggy mountain pass under a charcoal sky, your boots scraping against gravel as your breath curls into fog. And for the 100th time, you curse the terrain, not because it's cold, not because it's steep, but because assassins were never meant to be mountaineers. The fantasy loves rooftops and towers, but the reality is this. Sometimes your mark retreats to the wilderness, and suddenly you're not a trained killer. You're an unwilling survivalist. The moment a target leaves the comfort of cities and courts, your mission triples in difficulty. You find yourself sleeping beneath trees, dodging wolves, bartering with suspicious shepherds, and eating dried oats that taste like old wood chips. Historians still argue whether medieval assassin guilds had rural protocols or dedicated wilderness agents. But in your case, it's sink or swim more in one memorable mission. Freeze or freeze slightly slower. That noble you're tracking has taken refuge in a mountain monastery, hidden behind layers of snow, piety, and silence. Reaching him means days of trekking, nights of shivering under inadequate cloaks, and mornings where your fingers barely move enough to lace your boots. It's the kind of hardship that slowly replaces fear with numb resolve. No one sees you here. No crowds to vanish into. No roofs to leap from just open ground, and the constant threat of exposure. Once, during a mission in the Carpathians, you fell into a half-frozen river while stalking a traveling cleric. You had to cut your cloak free, build a fire in a cave, and lie naked next to your own dagger for warmth, teeth chattering like church bells. You got pneumonia anyway. You made the kill 3 weeks later, delirious and coughing blood, dressed in a peasant's stolen shawl. Quirky fact: some isolated monasteries bred large dogs not for protection, but to find lost monks in the snow. A lesson you learned firsthand when one barked its way through your hideout, tail wagging like it wanted to adopt you. You gave it jerky and begged it not to bark again. It listened. Barely. The wilderness isn't just forests and snow. Sometimes it's swamps, bogs, or deserts. You once spent a week tracking a mark through the fens of East Anglia, where the mud sucked your boots off and mosquitoes swarmed like angry spirits. You walked barefoot for 2 days, feet raw and bleeding, only to discover your target had already died of fever. No payment, no closure, just sore feet and another face you never saw. Then there are the mountain passes, treacherous, narrow trails that give way to landslides with no warning. You've seen horses vanish into the mist with riders screaming after them. You've watched a rival assassin try to take a shortcut only to fall into a ravine, body bouncing like a discarded puppet. You buried what was left. Kind of. The silence out here is different. It's not the hush of a crowded street before a strike. It's deep, soul-eating silence. At night, it presses against your ears like cloth soaked in oil. You start hearing things: your own heartbeat, whispers that aren't there, voices of old kills you thought you'd buried. You whisper back, sometimes just to feel less alone. Once, during a long mission through a pine forest, you started talking to an owl that perched above your camp. You named it Brother Alder. You think it judged you. There's a strange purity in killing someone out here. No witnesses, no echoes. Just you, them, and the crunch of snow or the snap of a twig. You crept through a tent once, deep in a mercenary encampment, hidden in a highland valley. Your mark was snoring, wine-heavy and bloated. You ended him with a needle through the neck and vanished before the campfire crackled again. You left no trace but a bloody pillow and the faintest imprint of your knees in the moss. Sometimes your targets are hunters themselves, men and women who know how to live off the land, who can smell movement, who can hear branches shift to ridges away. These are the most dangerous. One wrong footstep and you'll prey. You've woken to find your own traps disarmed, your food stolen, your path marked with strange symbols. Once, you played cat and mouse for 12 days through foggy hills with a former inquisitor turned fugitive. When you finally cornered him, he grinned and said, "Took you long enough." You didn't smile back. He knew why. Survival in the wild means learning to slow your body, tune your senses, become part of the landscape. You move like a ghost among trees, eat roots, chew bark to stave off hunger, trap rabbits with string and silence. You learn to predict weather by how the crows fly. You grow used to the smell of your own unwashed skin, the itch of lice in your tunic, the way your muscles ache from cold and repetition. And through it all, the kill remains a beacon shining through the discomfort, the danger, the delirium. You hold on to it like a monk clings to prayer. The act of ending a life becomes the only moment of warmth. And yet, even here, things can go wrong. Nature doesn't care for your mission. Storms rage without warning. Paths disappear beneath snow. A mountain goat once chased you for nearly a mile. You're still not sure why. You've had to use rocks as weapons, snow as camouflage, and moss as bandages. You've crawled into tree hollows to escape patrolling monks and hidden under dead leaves while wolves prowled nearby. Sometimes you ask yourself, is it worth it? All this pain for one silent dagger in the dark. But then you remember the oath, the cause, the coin, and maybe, just maybe, the need to be the best at what you do. Historians debate whether assassin guilds truly thrived in the wilderness, but you know this. Those who can kill here, away from crowds and comforts, are the deadliest of all. They leave no ballads, no signatures, no legends, just missing persons and quiet rumors. And you've become one of them. Out here, your name fades, your voice grows still. Your body becomes earth, movement, wind. The wilderness no longer feels foreign, it feels like home. A cruel, cold, unforgiving home. But still, home. You sit across from a candle in a nameless village tavern, hunched in the corner wearing clothes you didn't own a week ago, your face half concealed beneath a frayed hood, and your new name one of dozens of codes in your mind as if trying to find a place to settle. Retirement, if you can call it that, looks nothing like rest. There's no cottage in the countryside, no final payday or golden handshake. There's just this, a quiet identity scraped together from silence and lies, the fading memory of who you were, and a knowing sense that someone, maybe many, are still looking for you. You've spent your whole life being unseen, and now invisibility is all you have left. You speak in a new accent. You invent a backstory. You sell charcoal, or you make candles, or you keep bees. You're not sure which lie you'll use today. Sometimes it changes mid. Historians still argue whether assassins could truly leave the trade, or whether they were always pulled back in. But you know the truth is both simpler and crueler. The only retirement is to vanish completely, or be vanished by someone else. You once met a man in a coastal town who claimed to be a former guildmaster. He sold fish, had a limp, and refused to speak of anything before the age of 40. 2 weeks later, he disappeared without a trace. No struggle, no blood, just gone. You didn't ask questions. You paid your tab and moved on. Quirky fact. In 1317, a supposed retired assassin opened a bakery in Bologna, only to poison 12 nobles who passed through town over the course of a year. Some say it was vengeance. Others claim it was just a force of habit. Either way, the guild sent someone to silence him, and the next morning, only burnt bread remained. That's the thing about walking away from death tends to follow, even now, as you stir a stew beside your rented hearth and listen to the murmurs of locals who think you're some washed-up soldier. Part of you remains alert. Your ears twitch at unfamiliar footsteps. Your eyes trace movements in the shadows. You still count exits, measure distances, judge weights of objects that could be turned into weapons. You haven't slept deeply in months or years. When you do, it's shallow and scattered. Your dreams are loud. They crash with memory, faces, voices, screams, blood. You wake sweating, heart pounding like you're still on a mission. But there's no handler anymore. No orders tucked in wax-sealed envelopes. Just you and your new life, if you can even call it that. You chop wood. You trade for salt. You smile politely at the merchant's daughter who doesn't know your hands once ended kings. You offer help to the old man with the broken cart, and he calls you a kind soul. You feel like a fraud. The worst part is, sometimes you wish you weren't retired. The silence becomes too loud. The stillness too heavy. You miss the clarity that came with a mission, the purpose, the clean line from point A to point B, even if it meant death. Now, your days meander. You plant a garden and forget to water it. You carve a chair and never sit in it. You start whittling spoons because it keeps your hands from shaking. You get used to hearing your own voice again, low and slow, and not just in whispered prayers before a kill, but you still lie every day. You lie about where you're from, who your parents were, what that scar on your wrist is. You tell stories that sound almost real because pieces of them are real, and the rest is just scaffolding. One time, a traveling bard came through town and sang a ballad that vaguely resembled one of your old kills. The townsfolk clapped. You drank quietly in the back, hands trembling on the cup, wondering if the bard had known. Probably not, but maybe. You left that night anyway. That's how it goes. Now settle, hide, blend, vanish. You've been a carpenter, a fisherman, a clerk, a guard, a priest's assistant, and once ironically a gravedigger. That one suited you. There was comfort in the earth, in the steady rhythm of the shovel. You knew how most of those varied had met their end. Some you had met personally, and yet, the greatest challenge in this so-called retirement isn't evading capture or living frugally. It's not forgetting who you were. It's not giving in to the lie completely, because deep down, a flicker of the old fire remains. You still know how to move silently through a room. You still keep your blades hidden under floorboards. You still sharpen them on quiet nights, even though you haven't used them in months. You can't help it. It's part of you. And sometimes, when someone in town mentions injustice, when a corrupt tax collector passes through, or a merchant cheats a widow, you feel it flare up. The itch, the need. You don't act on it. You can't. But it simmers. It simmers like a wound that never healed. You tell yourself it's just instinct, residual muscle memory, but you know better. A retired assassin doesn't just crave peace. He tests himself against it. You find yourself practicing your old routines in secret, scaling trees, shadowing travelers, timing guards. You do it under the pretense of keeping yourself sharp. But sharp for what? There's no mission, no target, no contract, just old habits and older ghosts. Sometimes you receive letters, not signed, not sealed, just a slip of paper on your doorstep or tucked in your cloak while you sleep. They're not threats, not always. Some are apologies. Some are warnings. Once, it was a name an old friend from the order. You never went looking. If he's still alive, he'll understand. If he's not, then the name was meant to remind you. You're never truly out. That's the real cost of this life. Not just the kills, or the lies, or the pain, but the knowledge that freedom is temporary. That one day, someone will come knocking. And it'll be your turn to vanish, not into a new life, but into the dirt. You don't fear it. Not exactly. But you do wonder if they'll send someone good. Someone like you. And if they do, you'll understand. You'll even make it easy. Because the only thing worse than being hunted your whole life is realizing you don't know how to live any other way. You weren't supposed to feel it anymore. Not the hesitation, not the ache in your gut, not the flicker of doubt that dances across your thoughts like a moth flirting with flame butt. Here you are, perched above a tiled rooftop in the moonlight, blade in hand. Watching the man you've been sent to kill sit at a desk surrounded by books and warmth and laughter. His children just kissed him goodnight. His wife brushed his hair back with the kind of tenderness you thought had been extinct since the wars. You knew this target would be different. The dossier said traitor, but nothing about family, nothing about the way. He reads aloud with inflection and silly voices. Or how he leaves his door unlocked in a town where no one does. And yet, the mark is the mark. Your body moves before your conscience catches up. Silence steps across stone, breath tight in your chest. The warmth of the evening breeze brushing your face like a cruel parody of peace. You slip inside. It's too easy. It always is. You find him focused, scribbling something by candlelight. A ledger, a journal, a letter to someone he might never see again. You pause just for a second, but it's enough. He looks up. You freeze. Recognition flickers. Not of you, but of death. The room stretches around that glance, like it's been holding its breath. Then, without thinking, he says, "Please," not in front of them. And suddenly, everything you ever believed about silence, efficiency, purpose, it collapses under the weight of a single human plea. You step back. You nod. He walks out into the garden without a word, leaving his family behind. You follow. When it's done, there's no drama, no sound but the wind. He simply sinks to the earth, like a man too tired to stand any longer. You whisper something, an apology, a prayer. You're not sure anymore. You slip away, leaving nothing behind but footprints in the dew. And then it hits you truly, finally hits you. Every face, every breath stolen, every life cut short, justified by orders you never questioned. You thought you were made of steel, of will, of the same stone from which your target's tombs were carved. But you're not. You're flesh, fractured, blood-soaked, weary flesh. And as you walk through the silent alleys, away from yet another life ended, you begin to cry. Not loudly, not with rage, just slow, steady tears, like the rain that starts when no one's watching. Historians still debate whether elite assassins ever suffered from the burdens of their duty, or if they dissociated into legend long before death claimed them. You could have told them the answer, but now you no longer want to talk. Quirky detail. In a preserved 14th century notebook found in Tuscany, a scribbled margin reads, "I saw his eyes before he fell. They were mine." No one knows who wrote it or why, but you do. You understand now. The final hit was never about the target hit. It was always about you. The one death you couldn't escape was your own, piece by piece, taken with every contract, every mission, every name etched onto your memory like a tombstone no one would visit. You wander the streets for hours. The guild's gone quiet. No new orders. No watchers in the crowd. You read, not even sure if you still in the order or if the VE lets you drift into the purgatory reserved for those too broken to serve and too dangerous to release. Maybe this was the final test. Not the kill, but how it shattered you. Maybe you failed. Or maybe this is what passing looks like. Realizing too late what the cost really was. You sit at a fountain, dawn breaking behind you, pigeons cooing like a choir of ghosts. A child stirs inside the house you left behind. A life continues because you chose mercy, or cowardice, or something in between. You stare at your hands. They're trembling. You wonder if you've always shaken and just never noticed. You slip off your gloves, press your palms into the stone, let the cold seep into you. You don't belong anywhere anymore. You can't go back. But forward, you don't know what that looks like. Maybe it's a monastery. Maybe it's a nameless island. Maybe it's a quiet death under a different name. But for the first time, you crave something you've never had. Peace, not safety, not power, not even redemption. Just stillness. A place where your past doesn't echo in every shadow. Where your name, whatever it is, means nothing to anyone. A clean slate, but you know better. There's no cleaning this. The blood's in your bones. The faces lie in your memory, like stained glass windows in a cathedral built to honor regret. You stand, you walk, you don't look back. You'll disappear again, just like always. New name, new face. But something fundamental has cracked. You're not the same blade, not the same ghost. You're something else now. Something softer, sadder, something human. And maybe, in some corner of the world, under some forgotten name, you'll find a way to live with what you've done. Not erase it, just live with it. That, in the end, might be your truest mission. One last impossible task. And maybe, just maybe, you'll survive it. So now, with the night winding down and your journey through shadows at last drawing to a close, let's take a moment to let the silence settle. Breathe deeply, slowly, and let the weight of those old rooftops, those forgotten missions, those lost names, all of it dissolve into the quiet. You've wandered through the life of a ghost, felt the chill of hidden blades, the press of duty, the loneliness of the job no one was ever meant to survive. But here, in the calm of this moment, none of that can touch you. The world is hushed. The walls around you are still. That soft background hum the fan, the distant crickets, the rhythm of your own heart. It's the only sound that matters now. Let it lull you. Let it remind you that, for tonight at least, you're safe. No one is watching. No one is waiting. You've seen enough, done enough, survived enough. Let your breath stretch longer. Let your body soften. If your eyes are still open, they'll soon feel heavy. And if they're already closed, good. Let the darkness embrace you, not with fear, but with warmth. You're not running, not tonight. You're just resting. Let the echoes fade. Let the names slip away. There's nothing left to remember. Only sleep, only peace. Just like that final ghost, you're not lost. You're just somewhere else now. Somewhere quieter,